Hello, everyone. Just waiting for folks to filter in. We'll give people a few more seconds. Thank you so much for joining us today on this Tuesday. And our webinar is titled today, Opioid Harm Reduction Community Overview Tool. This session is part of the Canadian Red Cross Fall 2024 webinar series on opioid harm reduction for Indigenous peoples. Our National Risk Reduction and Resilience team hosts virtual learning events throughout the year to share knowledge and ideas for communities, families, and individuals to make their communities safer and stronger. We will also share the registration web pages for the next two webinars in our series with you in the chat momentarily. You can also learn about and register for our other webinars at that same link. If you are unable to join us for the first webinar in our series, the recording will be available on YouTube and we will share that link as well. We also have an optional roundtable discussion after our session today, and we will be sharing more details with you in a little bit. Before we begin, we would like to frame how and why the Canadian Red Cross is working with Indigenous peoples across Canada. In addition to our Indigenous peoples framework, the International Federation of Red Cross, Red Crescent, and Red Crystal Societies has seen fundamental principles which we also honor in Canada. Interestingly, these principles align with Indigenous peoples of Canada's 7 sacred teachings. Across Turtle Island, these are also known as the grandfather teachings of wisdom, love, respect, bravery, honesty, humility, and truth. And we will share that framework for you in the chat as well momentarily. And just before we dive into our actual presentation, just a few housekeeping items. So you can scan the QR code on your screen to visit our registration page for our learning series, as well as our YouTube channel. Today's webinar is recorded and will be uploaded to that channel. And our session is also offered in English today. However, closed captioning and translation into French is available. In order to access this, just click the closed captioning button in your Zoom control panel at the bottom of your screen. We will also be using some interactive features, such as using the chat box, and it's completely voluntary to participate in any of our activities, but we encourage and appreciate your participation. We will also have a brief 10-minute Q&A period at the end of our presentation, so you can leave your questions in the Q&A box in the control panel at the bottom of your screen. However, we will be having a separate optional roundtable discussion where we will have a chance to share more about the community overview tool in specifics and invite you to come on camera and actually have a discussion with us. So we will be sharing that link at the end of our Q&A session if you have time to join us for that after. We will also have a feedback survey that launches on your browser once you exit today's webinar, and we really appreciate your input on how we did. Finally, if you have any questions or comments about our webinar today or our virtual learning offerings in general, please email us at rrr@redcross.ca. All this information is coming to you in the chat very quickly. So without further ado, I would love to now introduce our presenters for today, Kristen Jordan, Jackie Jesso, and Leslie Ann Morley. Welcome and thank you so much.
Oh, you're neat. Thank you so much, April. We would like to take the space to share our own territorial and land acknowledgements in order to situate us in this relationship to the land that we share. If you're comfortable, we would love to hear from you and encourage you to introduce yourself and provide your land or territorial acknowledgement in the chat function. My name is Kristen Jordan. I'm a Cree Irish woman, and I'm speaking to you today from the traditional territory of the First Nations and Métis people who have lived on and cared for this land for generations. Treaty 6 encompasses a rich tapestry of cultures, history, and language, and we honor the diversity Indigenous communities, including the Cree, Blackfoot, Dene, who continue to contribute to the vitality of this land. Jackie?
Thank you. I live on the lands of the Anishinaabeg and Three Fires Confederacy, and also the Haudenosaunee peoples. These peoples came long before and I'm so grateful for the beautiful land, water, and sky they took such good care of. And I enjoy it out my window as I'm here today. So thank you, everybody.
Right. And again, my name is Kristen Jordan. I accepted a position with the Red Cross in May of 2024 with the National Indigenous Programs Health Promotion Team as a public health advisor. I've been given the honor of presenting the work completed by the National Indigenous Programs Team on opioid harm reduction to this wonderful audience today.
I can start. My name's Jackie, as I said earlier, and I'm the mental health lead on the National Mental Health Team and Mental Health and Psychosocial Support Team for the Red Cross. But who I really am is reflected in this picture here. I have three children. One would not allow me to put the picture on the screen, but these are two of my children whom I'm eternally fascinated and deeply love and care for. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. And as you can see, I'm the mother of two beautiful children. I'm a foster mom for 12 different animal shelters. I train PTSD dogs in my spare time. I come from a long line of farmers and still farm our family farm today. I've been a social worker for 18 years, working the front lines with Indigenous communities. This is a topic that touches my heart on both a professional and personal level. Do we have LA available to introduce herself?
You bet, I am here. Hopefully everyone can hear me all right. I am Leslie Ann, although everyone calls me LA, like the city of Los Angeles. And I've been with Red Cross for about 13 years, but I've been teaching Red Cross programs for 30. And I am based in Saskatoon, Treaty 6 territory, homeland of Métis people. Stone's throw away from Batoche, so much history going on there for Red Cross, as well as Indigenous peoples too. And for myself, I am the picture that we have up there is myself and my fiance for another 5 days before we get married on Sunday. That's Gary. And I am a sister. I am a daughter. I am auntie to 4 nephews and a niece as well. I call them my little loves, but they are all now between the ages of 12 and 19, so maybe not so little anymore. But I absolutely live through them in many, many ways. And my family is very new to the lands that we live on. My mother and my 4 grandparents were all born overseas. So we are kind of very new to the land and always love learning and respecting people and history and the stories that come from it. So thank you.
Thank you, LA. So everyone, we are thrilled to have you join us today for today's information webinar. Thank you for taking the time to be here. Whether you're tuning in from the bustling streets of Toronto or the scenic landscapes of British Columbia or anywhere in between, your presence enriches our conversation. Please feel free to use the chat to ask questions or share thoughts throughout the presentation. And let's get started. Jackie will lead you through an overview of our learning goals.
Thank you, Kristen. Okay, so today's learning goals and what we can expect from our time together is lots of really good things. So we're going to start with learning about the community overview tool we are piloting. And we'll move into sort of the resources and tools and ways that you can be supported in using these tools or thinking it through with your community. And then we're going to invite you to become of a broader, different conversation, which is the tabletop that follows this webinar, and to engage in discussions that are community building and community centric in relation to how these tools can be applied and what the struggles might be and how we can work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. I would like to just take a brief moment and pause and share with you about what we're speaking of in the next webinars, in the interest of making this space as safe as possible for those who join us on this journey. When we speak about the opioid crisis and harm reduction, naturally, we will be speaking about topics like depression, grief, loss, trauma, and ultimately addiction and all that it encompasses in this experience. We understand that while these discussions are important, they are deeply personal, vulnerable, and sensitive topics that can bring up complicated emotions, especially for those of us who have firsthand experience with these subjects. So I ask you, please take a moment to check in with yourself. Ask, Am I in a good headspace to hear this conversation? And who can I reach out to if I need support? We've attached a few national resources that are easily accessible to you via phone call, email, or text. Whatever is more comfortable for you, please do not hesitate to use these resources if needed. April will be dropping these in the chats. And now I'm going to go back over to one of my partners to LA to talk about a little bit of history.
Sure. I know there's a slide coming up for that just a second here, but just to give a little bit of context around why we find ourselves in this space right now within Red Cross. And it actually goes back to about 1980 originally and into the early 2000s, where we were kind of working alongside, not just within the Red Cross and other Red Crescent organizations and other partners around the world, but also within the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, coming together with the UN to have a partnership with the office of their office on drug and crime, and had a bit of a kind of a gap in there in some time wise. But since 2021, we've been really active, thanks to some support we had from Health Canada's substance use and addictions program, being able to fund a program that and a research program that led to courses being developed as a result. And what that allowed us to do, it'll really kind of helped us take a look and see that, you know, where the need was, where community need is, where need is coast to coast to coast, and what that looks like, and develop some awareness education programming to help address the need. And that began with a 15-minute awareness section that was integrated into all standard first aid courses. And that those of you who have taken first aid recently may have noticed that change. There is that separate piece on opioid harm reduction awareness. From there, a 60-minute course was developed to really help educate individuals on how to be an opioid harm reduction champion, or an OHR champion. What that really looked at was, how can we reduce stigma? How can we increase awareness? How can we change the language being used to speak of opioid harm reduction practices, those who are in modes of dependency? You know, how can we put that person first language together as well? How can we, you know, talk about someone in a way that is saying, you know, this is a person with lived experience. This is a person who is in recovery. This is a person who, versus calling, you know, referring to somebody as an addict of this, right? Putting that person first and really changing that to help reduce the stigma. From there, we had a first aid for poisoning, opioid poisoning emergencies course. This course is still available and accessible online. And this really focused on, how can we help support someone through that crisis moment when there was a poisoning. Again, changing that language around from overdoses to poisoning, to really try to reduce that stigma. How can we help individuals be prepared on how to use naloxone? And naloxone kits are distributed with this situation as well, these courses. And what that really helped us do was help give confidence and competence to people who may have individuals in their lives that they were concerned about, or if they're in a workplace situation that may require it. And it was a very successful program. Also talking a little bit more about how opioids actually impact the brain and how naloxone helps neutralize that. Shortly after that, around the same time, we actually, our injury preventions program team, we started to develop a education series for youth. We had a lot of requests coming in from Indigenous communities and other communities as well, looking for awareness education for youth and how to broach the topic of opioid harm reduction when we know children and youth are exposed in different ways, in different methods, whether it's themselves, their friends, at home, whatever that might look like. How can we help support? And following that is, and that kind of takes a little bit of time to develop it. You'll notice it's a couple of years process to develop all those pieces to make sure everything is evidence-based. It consults with community, making sure that the language is right, that the context is right as well. And from there's also an instructor course created where that allowed people in community to be trained on delivering that first aid for opioid poisoning emergencies course, and being able to distribute naloxone kits as well, kind of putting that community ownership on that delivery. Right now in 2025, my team is actually looking to pilot learning activities in schools for grades 4 to 6s, and this will really help to inform the development of the full complement of kindergarten to grade 12 activities for opioid harm reduction. And then moving forward, as we kind of work forward in this kind of space, it's about strengthening our best practices, really working on and focusing on having Indigenous community consultation, representation in the working groups that we have, in the outputs that we have as well, and working as an ally and Indigenous team, really to have that consultation piece really, really strong. And one of those next things that actually leads into that for us is what Kristen's going to talk about next with the overview tool. So I'll pass it off to Kristen.
Thank you, Ellie. So I just want to start by giving you the basis idea for this overview tool. Because of community consults that I had undergone, I definitely heard concerns and wants and needs from communities. So I have done my best with my team to be respectful of the feedback that I've received. So I would like to thank you for the opportunity to discuss this tool. This tool is both adaptable and designed with community needs in mind. I want to introduce this option that embodies versatility, accessibility, and a focus on community engagement. This tool can serve as either a proactive or reactive resource, fully dependent on the specific needs and preferences of the community. It's user-friendly, that allows us to gather and generate valuable information while remaining straightforward, efficient, and respectful of everyone's time. Whether your community is interested in planning ahead, anticipating challenges, or addressing immediate issues as they arise, this tool can be seamlessly integrated. For example, as a proactive tool, it can be used to assess needs, gather feedback, and plan future initiatives. As a reactive tool, it can be swiftly deployed to address emergent needs or evaluate immediate responses to pressuring issues. By adapting to the moment, it meets communities where they are and helps guide them towards their goals. Now, understanding that every community operates differently and may have unique preferences, we are piloting this tool in several user-friendly formats: Microsoft Forms, Word, and fillable PDF. This variety allows each community to use whichever format aligns best with their comfort and operational style. Whether it's the convenience of online entry, the familiarity of Word document, or the ease of a fillable PDF, we are making sure the tool is accessible, customizable, and above all, simple to complete. We believe that information gathering should be straightforward, supportive process, not an overwhelming one. This is why this tool, This is why this tool is designed to be completed efficiently, minimizing the time needed to gather and share insights while maximizing the value of the information collected. We've kept it streamlined without sacrificing the quality of data it can provide, because your time is valuable and so is the work we do together. I would like to emphasize this tool is much more than a simple form. It's a gateway to understanding, adapting, and growing in a partnership with each community. With this tool, we're not just gathering information, we're building a foundation for insight, progress, and tailored support, however and whenever it's needed. Thank you for your commitment to your community, and thank you for considering this tool as a new way to foster growth, resilience, and collaboration. I want to take a minute and tell you about my team. The Indigenous Peoples Help Desk is here as an extension of your workforce and community. Think of us as partners who are ready to support you as you work with the community overview tool in this pilot program. If you're wondering where to start, we're here to help. We want to make sure you feel confident and supported at each step of the process. So thank you for allowing us to work alongside you. And please remember, the Indigenous Peoples Help Desk is here to make this experience as meaningful and effective as possible. We are just a message or a call away. I am going to pass it over to Jackie.
Thank you, Kristen. we're going to talk about transparency and scope, which is really critical at the outset of any sort of engagement, and in this forum in particular. Today, we're here to share learnings, to look at resources that were co-developed with communities and co-created with communities. We're here to review the opioid harm reduction journey and the community overview tool, and to begin a second layer of consultation at the round table that follows. So we're not functioning as medical, educational, or legal experts today. We won't be functioning in that way in the future either. But we encourage you to reach out to people in your community who are experts in this regard, so they can provide safe guidance and deepen your knowledge. We're here at the strategy level and to inform you of a tool or a strategy in relation to opiates harm reduction. And so we're going to keep the conversation at that level where we've been involved in consultations. And also this is sort of the knowledge that we have confidently can communicate to you today. So thank you. Just in terms of the location of the community overview tool. So you can see here there's 3 phases: planning, activation, and recovery. So this arc is an activation or an action and implementation arc. And the opioid harm reduction community overview tool is a planning stage tool, but it can also be used reactively, like Kristen said. So even though the planning might be in the moment or at the time when emergencies related to opiates use are occurring, you can start using it then as well. But for the way that it's designed, at this point in time, it's designed to sort of begin the reflexive process in a community so that they can begin to look at the infrastructure they have in place, the activities that are currently ongoing and have been ongoing, the things that they do, the supports that they have, and to begin to look at how they can be woven together in a way that supports people in harm reduction capacity, but also, as Kristen described earlier, in an emergency poisoning event. So just remember that we're here for all of the phases in terms of reaching out to us and reaching out to the help desk, the Indigenous Peoples Help Desk. But the tool itself is, the entry point is the planning phase. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jackie. We'd like to move into talking about the ways of practice that have really guided our work on this tool so far. So we have looked at it from a two-eyed seeing approach, strength-based approach, and from an Indigenous lens. We know we have some people in the audience who may not have an understanding of these principles. So I would like to start by sharing the two-eyed seeing approach. It's a framework that integrates Indigenous and Western perspectives to create a more inclusive understanding of the world. It was first introduced by Elder Albert Marshall and has since become a guiding philosophy in fields like education, healthcare, environment, management, and research. The approach aims to respect and blend both Indigenous and Western ways of knowing, acknowledging the strength each offers. The guiding principles of two-eyed seeing further helps us to acknowledge the distinct and whole nature of Indigenous knowledge and ways of knowing. Similarly, it helps us recognize the distinct nature of Western knowledge and ways of knowing. Some overview of the core principles. Seeing from both perspectives. Two-eyed seeing encourages viewing issues through both an Indigenous lens as well as a Western lens, in appreciating the distinct strengths of both, creating balance and harmony. The approach is rooted in the belief that both knowledge systems offer complementary insights, collaborative problem solving, Two-eyed seeing fosters collaborative problem solving by valuing both perspectives and people from diverse backgrounds and how they can work together on complex issues. Respect, inclusivity, and reconciliation. This approach aligns with broader goals of reconciliation, promoting respect and inclusivity for Indigenous knowledge. The two-eyed seeing approach promotes a deeper, more inclusive understanding by bridging distinct perspectives. And now I will pass it over to Jackie to speak on strength-based.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Kristen.
Yes.
Okay, so the strength-based approach at a systems level, this slide gives you sort of the reasons why, the logics for implementing the strength-based approach at a systems level. And for all of these reasons support, why we should use that model. First, it empowers communities. It fosters collaboration and trust within communities and also between partners. It's sustainable. Sustainable solutions are designed and built because they come from the knowledge, the knowing, and the spirit of the community, their history, their context, their understandings of each other. So it's very durable solutions that emerge from communities where there's a strength-based approach. It inevitably, a strength-based approach by necessity has to have the community lead. And so people who have particular knowledge and capacities to support do so, but they're not experts. They're equal others who are engaged in a collaborative process. It focuses on the long term, so they're not looking for short-term solutions that might be more deficit-oriented and band-aid approaches. And it really honors the cultural practices and processes that are embedded in the community and express themselves through relations, through activities, through the calendar year. So we are, Kristen's team has worked very concertedly, and Leslie Ann's team have worked very concertedly to employ a strength-based approach. And in fact, the Red Cross, this is our approach. This is how we try to engage with communities. And it's foundational to our aim to work collaboratively and in relation to communities and not to come in as the expert. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.
Now for this slide here, what we're talking about is more sort of the organic way that we in the Red Cross and also LA and Kristen have been working. So from a strength-based perspective, in terms of how it's evolved in OHR with Indigenous communities, it's really an honest approach. So it looks at the realities. It's not positive and denying the past. It actually honors the past. It pays close attention to the history, acknowledges cumulative trauma and violence, misrepresentation, exclusion and racism, and losses. So it's an honest gaze in terms of looking at the realities of the present, but it also simultaneously looks at collective resistance. So the ways the community, in the face of all those sources and forces of violence in their myriad and complex, subtle and direct ways, they've been able to collectively resist, like to respond to find ways around or through, or alternative strategies to navigate these harms, whether they be event specific or time specific, or they have really long tails. So they work collectively to resist through healing, through finding truth, to keeping the truth alive, both within communities, but also with external others. And they collectively have mobilized through time, and every day they collectively mobilize because the cumulative forces that harm are always active and currently active. So there's lots of strengths in Indigenous communities, and the strength-based perspective invites us to look at the realities of the past and the present without value, not positive or negative, not good or bad, not right or wrong. It's just the facts of the present. And to look very specifically at the ways the communities have navigated those harms and continue to vitalize life, community and cultural activities and expression, identity. And so that's where Kristen and Leslie Ann have worked. And our teams in CRC work. We work from this location. So thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm going to speak to you briefly now about the Indigenous lens. As we created this tool, or have started to create this tool, and as we continue to create it, we will be always practicing through an Indigenous lens. And that lens encourages you to practice deep listening and humility. Approach the community with an open mind, ready to listen rather than lead. Indigenous values often emphasize humility and respect for others' experiences. Expect to build relationships over time. Strong, meaningful relationships are foundational in Indigenous cultures. Take the time to build and trust, prioritizing long-term commitment over quick outcomes. Acknowledge the roles of elders and knowledge keepers. Elders hold wisdom and traditional knowledge. Engage with them respectfully and seek their guidance. Integrate land-based practices. Connection to land and nature is central in many Indigenous communities. Acknowledge this value by incorporating land-based practices such as outdoor meetings, gatherings, or environmental projects that respect nature. Honor collective well-being over individual gain. Many Indigenous values focus on the collective well-being of the community. Use culturally respectful language and terminology. Learn and use respectful terms specific to the community, avoiding language that may have negative Indigenous names, language, and self-identifiers as signs of respect. Understand and respect traditional protocols and customs. Indigenous communities may have specific cultural protocols. Acknowledge historical and cultural context. Show awareness of the community's historical experiences, including the impact of colonialization, historical trauma, and resilience. Focus on the strength-based approach, as we just mentioned. Support cultural revitalization and identity. Many Indigenous communities prioritize revitalization of language, cultural practices, and traditional knowledge. Encourage storytelling and oral tradition. Storytelling is essential Indigenous practice for passing down knowledge, history, and values. Work collaboratively and value self-determination. Respect the community's rights to make its own decisions. Allow Indigenous voices to lead the project and prioritize Indigenous ways of working. By centering these values, you foster an inclusive, culturally respectful environment that acknowledges and honors the unique contributions of Indigenous communities.
Okay, everybody. Thank you, Kristen. This is a time for reflection here. So we're going to invite you to share in the chat any nature, cultural, community, or land-based practices you use as a professional in your professional working capacity, perhaps with people who are experiencing substance use vulnerabilities, or as a community person who's sort of maybe has someone in their family who's substance use involved or opiates involved. And the way that you try to synthesize your concern and to keep yourself feeling rested, whole, engaged, and balanced. So please share in the chat. And I'm sorry, I don't know if I can see the chat fully at this point, but ask. I'll ask.
I
You
believe
can
I
see
can
it?
see it.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
sorry, I can't see it, unfortunately. Yeah. But take your time and offer any ideas you have. No wrong ideas, no right or wrong here. Mm-hmm.
Oh, quiet meditation and prayer, getting outdoors for a walk, hunting camps, sweats, smudging. Oh, there's all sorts of ideas. Picking medicine, traditional healers, smudging again, fires, work with youth, land-based activities with youth. Oh, I love when the youth is involved.
Mm-hmm.
Grounding, feet in the grass. I'm big on that one, Robin. Yeah, that's my jam. Walking, being near water, circles. Oh, these are wonderful, you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely wonderful.
Mm-hmm. These are amazing, and thank you very much. And please continue to add in throughout the rest of the webinar. And one of the important things is we know that nature is healing. We know the land is healing. Indigenous communities know that in a way that they've never forgotten. In the Western, in the Western world, there's been a forgetting. And now a slow return back to that. But we really appreciate your contributions, the things that you add in, and please always encourage others to engage in those strategies. If there's something that works for you, it's likely to work for others too at some point in time. So share what you know to be helpful. Thank you. Okay, so now audience, what we're going to do here is we're going to talk to Kristen and I, who've worked in opiates harm reduction teams in communities, have lots of experience with individuals, families, and communities who are faced with the complexity of this issue. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have a conversation, or mostly we're going to be listening to Kristen. And so I'm going to ask her some questions based on her experience in communities, looking at this tool, getting consultation and feedback, really problematizing the items in the tool and trying to reset them and realign them in a way that made sense for communities. So I'm going to ask her some questions and we're going to hear what she has to say and what she learned from communities. So that's what we're going to do for the next couple of slides. So Kristen, tell us about this slide here. So when you were seeking input around community supports and when you ask the question, like, are people in your community working or volunteering in harm reduction? Like, what kinds of reactions or what kinds of understandings emerged at that point in the conversation?
I think one of the biggest things that we need to realize as we support people through filling out this tool or support communities really viewing themselves from that strength-based is that there is always an answer. So many times I will talk to communities and propose this question, and the answer is we don't have anyone. We don't have anyone that does that. And I believe that is simply because we have spent a very long time. I've worked in health field, education field, and government, where it's believed that the only people that can help are the people with titles.
Right.
The only people that can help are the people that are dispatched to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been drilled into my head as a professional, into communities to the point where they can't, or they have find difficulty acknowledging their own support systems.
Right.
So I always find that the best thing to do is ask questions, and those questions can look whatever your comfort level is. Ask them if there is anyone in the community that the youth go to when they need advice.
Mm-hmm.
Ask if there is someone that leads up ceremony. ask if there's someone that mobilized this community during a death. Wherever that is, your comfort level is, or the topic lands you, let them lead you. And I say that because I have worked with community before who told me they didn't have anything. They had nothing. And through our conversations, I found out that there was a group of 4 or 5 cookums in the community, and nothing happened in that community without these wonderful women knowing about it, and knowing about it in such a positive way. They were sewing the young people's regalia. They were baking with the kids. They would cook in times of death. They were in the schools. They were supporting young moms, but because they had no title, and sometimes they're not listed on these types of assessments, communities can overlook how valuable they are.
Right. No, beautifully said, Kristen. One of the things that I've noticed as well is that we actually believe sometimes some of the Western principles of the expert model, which is that the only people who can treat or respond to certain problems are the experts. And particularly, this is a health concern and a health risk, so it would be medical professionals. But in fact, we know that Indigenous communities and other communities have had to find solutions and have always had solutions. So one of the beautiful things that Kristen has done in her travels in community has learned that communities do have resources, and that this tool, even our tool here, or this tool here, is not necessarily an end point. You don't have to arrive and have these things here. What you need is a community matrix of support. And the community matrix of support was beautifully described just now by Kristen. So inviting people to look at what are the existing mechanisms of support, who's holding people, who's holding the community, and who's holding the care of others who are experiencing complexity. So this tool is actually an opportunity to engage in a deeper discussion and to look at sort of how the community is already supporting itself and how it has been for centuries. And putting aside some of these titles and the expert, although acknowledging that they're there and they have valuable roles, but not at the expense of being blind to the deep caring infrastructure that exists in the community and looking there for potential creative solutions. No, thank you. Kristen, did you want to say anything else about that?
No, that was wonderful, Jackie. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Now, this is a really important question here. And Kristen and I had several conversations about this, about communities not seeing themselves in a tool, in an overview tool, or more broadly in assessments, let's say. So communities not finding their language, themselves, their activities, the things that are about them in tools. And we know that's always a risk when you develop an instrument. And so I'm going to ask Kristen about this. And so here I go. So Kristen, what kinds of things came up when you were thinking, when you were asking the question? How about this first one, where how does your community incorporate Indigenous healing practices into substance use emergencies or substance use preparedness, response, or harm reduction? And select all that apply. What was the reaction to that? And what did you learn when you were engaged in those conversations?
I mean, for this particular question, most of the communities were able to see themselves in some place. And that was the good thing about the question is most communities were able to at least check one box. But that opened up the conversation. And again, right, even going back to the cookums I spoke of, you have to open the conversation. You have to listen to what is being said and try to build off it, right? So even if they were only able to check one box, I was able to kind of go back and talk, okay, well, what were some of the things the cookums did in the community? You mentioned they were making regalia. This means the children were dancing. They were making bannock. This means families were getting together to eat or feast, and it's these types of approaches, having people model good behavior, having mentors for the youth to look up to, coming together as groups. That's especially how we keep our young people safe. The more family and community involvement, the safer that they will be, because they'll have more people to speak to. They'll have more people that they want to strive to become. And that's a beautiful thing. When they're engaging in the positive behavior like dance and feasting, cooking, that's time not spent, moving towards places like addiction. So even if only one box can be checked, it is a place to start a conversation. It is a place to ask more, dive deep into it more. And, you're going to find practices that maybe aren't listed, but that doesn't mean they're not valuable. And it might just be the way the community is approaching things.
No, beautiful. Yeah, no, so it's interesting because one checkbox is like a doorway into a deeper side of a community, or a side that maybe isn't so visible to someone from away. So it's really important. Again, like this tool is not a metric of in relation to good or bad, right or wrong, total scores, 10 checks or one check. So it's not calibrated that way. It's calibrated as, trying to provide language and entry points into a deeper discussion. And there's absolutely many different things that are going on in communities. And Kristen, in her experience, she describes how she was able to use that one check as an entry point into actually finding so many ways that the community is actually engaged in deep caring, deep support, healing practices, prevention, health promotion, and all those good things with a natural weave and web of deep relations with culture, land, and even outside others who are providing opiates harm reduction support in this case, like the Red Cross. Thank you. Is there anything more you want to say, Kristen?
No, thank you very much, Jackie. I would like to engage everyone to get ready for our roundtable in the way that I would like you to share, because we are in the planning process of this tool. We are growing, we are changing constantly. And one of the main things that I would like to continue to do is reaching out to all different communities and getting feedback. So if you feel comfortable and would like to share in the chat or save it for the Q&A or the roundtable, what do you see as some potential obstacles to completing this overview tool? Give everyone a second. Oh, yes, I can. Absolutely. So what I'm asking, and if you don't feel comfortable sharing it in the chat, you can always save it for the roundtable or the Q&A. But do you see any, knowing your community or your family, or do you see any obstacles in completing an assessment tool like the one that we've put up on the screen? Trust issues. Yes, absolutely. Oh, yes, language issues. Yes. Okay, yeah. It could look like another ticky form, taking appropriate time, lack of time. Yes. We have tried very, very hard to streamline this as much as possible. And I know that that's something Vicky and April are still continuing to work on. So that's absolutely valid feedback. Thank you, everyone. Some communities are not as traditional as others. Racism, bias, stigma. Yes. And please join us. Discrimination and stigma. I am very glad that people are acknowledging this as something that needs to be discussed. In our third webinar, we will be discussing stigmas around opioid harm reduction and naloxone. So please join us for that. That's wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. And I will pass it on to April. Oh, just one last reminder, if you feel comfortable, please consider joining our roundtable after the webinar or contact the help desk to learn more about the tool and how you can help participate in this pilot. Now, over to April.
Thank you so much for this, Kristen and Jackie and LA. This was really wonderful. And I know there's a lot of conversation happening in the chat in terms of the particulars and the next steps for the tool. And we hope folks are able to join us for our optional roundtable discussion, again, coming up in 10 minutes. And you are welcome to bring your questions to that as well. But before that, we also have 2 more sessions coming up in our OHR series. And the information is here on the screen. The next one is happening in 2 weeks, November 26th, Busting the Myths Around Naloxone. And then our final webinar is on December 12th, Learning from Indigenous Communities. And in the bottom right corner, you can access our webpage again to sign up and register for those other sessions. And in terms of the roundtable, so it is a separate link that takes us to a Zoom meeting. This is the URL, so it's purl.redcross.ca/OHR roundtable. I'm going to pop it into the chat, and there is a passcode to access it. It's just 5 zeros, so 00000, and then you'll be in. So we'll be moving to that session momentarily. Well, we do have a few minutes now for like a quick Q&A if folks want to ask some questions now and they can't join us for the roundtable. So we'll leave the rest of our time for that. So please use the chat or the Q&A, whichever one you want, for any questions that you have for our team. And then hopefully we'll see many of you at the roundtable shortly at 2 p.m. Eastern. So just checking the chat, see if there are any questions. And really appreciate all the feedback as well. So it's a really wonderful interactive discussion. So we've been asked, is this tool currently available? If so, where can we find it? And I believe our team can answer that as well.
Yes, the tool is available, but from a pilot perspective. It is very much, and I would like to reiterate this, a growing and changing tool. So I believe at this point, it can be used internally. Please correct me if I'm wrong. And we want to continue to grow it before it is available on the website.
Yep, that's great, Kristen. And the spirit of having this be a participatory process and continuing to refine the tool is really important at the CRC. So this roundtable that's coming up is part of that process to get feedback as we continue to make it the best that we can. Linda asks, how much time is allotted for the roundtable? So it will be 30 minutes from 2 to 2:30 Eastern. And there are other ways for you to provide your feedback to our wonderful team as well as we continue to refine the tool. You can also reach us at rrr@redcross.ca or Indigenous Programs Help Desk at redcross.ca. I will take a minute to put those in the chat as well again. And I'm sure if there are more opportunities that you'd like to engage with our team one-on-one with additional feedback, I'm sure that they would be very receptive to that. So I'm just going to take a second and put the emails in the chat for everyone right now.
Kristen and Leslie, there was a question about data sovereignty in the chat. And my understanding is that we're not keeping information, community information at the Red Cross in relation to the overview tool. That's owned by the community. We're just offering guidance. So there's no data that we're collecting in that regard. Is there anything you would say or add to that that would be important for people to understand in terms of data sovereignty?
The ultimate plan is through the Microsoft Forms option. And again, this is the ultimate plan eventually, that they could send their data to the help desk or whatever department in the Red Cross they feel comfortable working with, and we can support them in growing their strengths or bridging some barriers. But again, that is completely up to community. It is not something we are requesting. It is not something they have to do to utilize the tool.
Okay. Leslie Ann, did you want to say anything about that?
No, Kristen took it right exactly right. What I was going to say is that if communities wish to share that information that has been gathered, they can, and we will certainly guide in whichever way is requested upon invitation. But no, Kristen nailed it right there.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thanks, April.
Thank you. Thanks, Jackie. Getting a lot of great feedback in the chat as well about the information that was shared today. And lots of folks looking forward to next steps in terms of the next phases of the tool. So that's great. And again, the email addresses that we just shared in the chat, if you'd like to participate in this ongoing journey with us, you can reach us at either email, and one of us will be happy to reach out and assist. So I'm seeing there are 3 minutes left. So if there are no more questions at the moment, I think what we'll do is we'll just take 2 minutes and we'll wrap up early, and then we will move over to the Zoom meeting link again on your screen, and the passcode again is 500000. And our presenters will be there to take folks into a more detailed discussion on the tool if you're interested and available. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and thank you so much, Kristen, Jackie, and Leslie Ann, for this wonderful presentation. We'll see you at the other link very soon.
April, before you go, are you able to just download the chat for us and shoot that over to us just in an email, just so we can just access the question? I wrote some of them down, but we can address them in the roundtable.
100%. There was so much richness happening. I took screenshots as well, so I'll be sure to give you that, Leslie Ann.
Thank you.
Okay. See everyone soon at the other link. Take care.